Hello everybody and welcome back to the Overlap Breakdown channel, and we're here this morning to discuss if Pep Guardiola has found a new weakness in Mikel Arteta's Arsenal that was exploited in the 2-0 victory by the Blues in the Carabao Cup Final. Now, I want to start this off by saying this was something, when I was watching the game, I've watched it back, I've watched it back once and watched it when it was live. This is very new what Pep Guardiola was doing, and I think it's nice to see Pep Guardiola come back to his best, I think, in a tactical sense. He had a few stumbles in the recent weeks. The West Ham game was really tough. The Real Madrid 2 legs was really tough, even though they started really well in that. But he said the other day in a press conference that oftentimes he makes mistakes in finals and he's marauded as a genius when they all go right. And in this game, it felt like what he was doing was incredibly risky, but I am going to sit here and maraud him as a genius because it was something we've not seen from Pep Guardiola this season, and it worked, and it completely nullified the best team in the Premier League, in Pep Guardiola's own words, in Arsenal. And I think it's very interesting to say this is a completely different dynamic between the two teams we've ever seen. Like, Arsenal come into this game being the team who were the best team in the Premier League, potentially the best team in Europe. And when you just look at that and you listen to Pep Guardiola and the way he talks about the game, the way he talks about the result against Arsenal, he actually references how unbelievable it is what City have done. And I think it stands out as one of Pep's biggest achievements in terms of winning the trophy with the current team he has, especially with the makeshift back two that he had. I know Kusanov's been absolutely extraordinary like the last couple of weeks, even throughout some of the dark patches. But they went there against an Arsenal team who had virtually everyone fit apart from Eze, Ødegaard, Timber, and they made it look quite simple. In the first 25 minutes, it actually looked like Arsenal were coming up against them. And what they were doing, Manchester City, straight from the off, is they were pressing Arsenal's build-up in a 4-2-4. Now, this is very, very risky. I've seen this happen quite a lot of times. But Arsenal, when they split the centre-halves on the keeper and dropped the full-backs really deep, Manchester City was standing with a zonal 4-2-4. Now, I'm going to explain why the zonal element of this 4-2-4 was the reason that Pep Guardiola was able to get so much success against Arsenal. So, with the ball being between the centre-halves, Arsenal were persisting with this slow-paced build-up, and there was a lot of circulation around the back four. Now, this happened more in the second half, but towards the end of the first half, Manchester City managed to start suffocating Arsenal, and that pattern from 25 minutes onwards ended up going throughout the entire second half and eventually for both goals as well. So this is what Manchester City were doing, pressing with a real high zonal 4-2-4. Now, the reason why it was zonal is because they didn't apply ball pressure onto the centre-halves or goalkeeper, and they allowed the centre-halves and goalkeepers time on the ball to play. Now, the problem is with Arsenal is they are not the greatest players in there in terms of playing through the lines, especially Kepa Arrizabalaga in comparison to David Raya. So when the ball was worked in here, they were looking for a lot of rotations ahead of the ball. So what was happening was Zubimendi and Rice were coming very, very deep, very narrow, but the cover shadows of Haaland, and I think it was actually Cherky who was leading the press, the cover shadows was denying the ball into the midfielders. This meant that Arsenal's two strikers were almost pinned in a box like this, with these two zonal players in Bernardo and Rodri. And what was happening is when the passing lanes were covered off into the number 6, Kepa, Gabriel, Saliba only really had one ball, and that was to hit the channel. Now, in the first 25 minutes, as I've said, they actually had some success with this. They played off Kai Havertz once, flicked it onto Gyökeres in the channel, and Kusanov got booked. There were a couple free kicks over here in this area from them long balls. But slowly but surely, Manchester City started to work themselves into the game with the press, using two zonal markers like this. Now, Arsenal were doing different things to try and get the ball in, but they were going too close to the ball. So Havertz was sometimes standing here to offer a +1. Saka actually had a moment around the 30th minute where he was stood in between the two midfielders. And Arsenal never could really find the space to play through. So I've got the first example to show you. So on your screen right now, we can see that Arsenal are now building up in that 4-2-4. But they have dropped Saka between the midfielders, asking for him to drop deep and play as the +1. Now, Manchester City, as we can see, no ball pressure applied on Kepa or Gabriel. Now, this ball is punted long by Gabriel and it is won by Bernardo Silva. Now, if we just look at the picture on your screen right now, we can see how reserved Manchester City's 4-2 is in behind Arsenal's midfield. So this 4-2 here was very deep. Now, This is why it's a massive problem for Arteta and why it was, for me, one of his worst displays I've seen. Manchester City were not compact in this game. Manchester City did not have complete compactness between the lines. They were not squeezing between the lines. They were not pressing man to man. They were not denying every bit of space. Look at the screenshot on your screen. There is space everywhere. And Arteta never once got adaptations right for that. There was rotations from Havertz, Saka coming deep for the ball, but that was not enough. Personally for me, hindsight of course, go to one sitter, push one between the lines, and you can get that a little bit more numerical dominance in behind Rodri and Bernardo Silva, especially if it was someone like Declan Rice. But that never came. And this block worked perfectly for Manchester City throughout large stints of the game. They challenged the centre-halves and the goalkeepers to play, and they could not play through Manchester City. So, some data on your screen right now. We've got the passing metrics from Manchester City Arsenal, and we can see that Arsenal had a 77% pass accuracy, which is their third worst in this season. They also played 176 of their 322 passes in their own half. And their passing accuracy in Manchester City's own half was 64%. Passing accuracy ending in the final third, 56%. 10 plus passing sequences. So we're talking about Arsenal taking the sting out of it, getting on the ball and playing. 4, which is the second lowest in the Arsenal this season. They also played only 19 progressive passes. To put that into perspective, Manchester City had 181 of them balls. Look at the difference between Man City's progressive passes and Arsenal's progressive passes. Arsenal could not get through the thirds to play, and they were not getting out of that situation right there from the Manchester City zonal high block. So we are now going to move on into a couple of quotes from the man of the match, which was Nico O'Reilly. So on CBS, I actually listened to him talking about what it was that Pep had said to him pre and half-time in the match. So we're going to go through these quotes one by one because both of them actually had very, very important outlooks on this match. So the first one is, Pep said to me before the game, Zubimendi will be man marking you. You're stronger than him. Go and win them headers. So when Manchester City were getting high up in the opposition's half, so now we've got Manchester City who are suffocating in onto this Arsenal block. As we know, Arsenal like to defend in this 4-4-2. Now, what happens is when Manchester City have got Haaland up here, and something a little bit interesting from Manchester City was they went back to having Semenyo Doku on each wing holding the width. And that was something that we've not seen in previous games of Manchester City under Guardiola because Semenyo was playing really close to the striker, really close to Haaland, but they were occupying a little bit too much of each other's space. And Semenyo is a very shot-heavy player. So he was taking a lot of the shotting opportunities and looks off of Haaland, really. But he was obviously getting his own output. Fast forward it, and now you've got Semenyo on this right-hand side playing kick and run against Hincapié, who had a really, really, really rough game against Semenyo. But as we mentioned in the piece when we did on Semenyo, he's almost impossible to stop, especially if he gets going on the kick and runs. Now, one thing that was happening on the left-hand side was Doku and Nico O'Reilly were rotating. So Doku would go and stand in here, Nico O'Reilly would go stand there. Now, Nico O'Reilly much more favours the inside run from this inverted left-back position to crash into the box from here, running across the blind side of Zubimendi. So if he crashes the box like this and City like to compact like this into the box, then Nico O'Reilly will be man-marked and followed through by Martin Zubimendi. Nico O'Reilly is a massive player, a big physical monster in the box, and a bit of a throwback in many of ways to an old-school English traditional midfielder who gets up and down, long legs, very powerful, and gets into the box. But if I just show you on your screen right now, so we can see for Nico O'Reilly's first goal, we can see that he's actually crashing the box from a wide position and he's dragging Zubimendi with him. Now, obviously, there is a massive Kepa Arrizabalaga mistake in this. But if you actually look at when the ball is dropped by Kepa and Nico O'Reilly is playing up against Zubimendi, if that player is Declan Rice, if that fullback is maybe Ait-Nouri, that goal probably doesn't happen. It's Nico O'Reilly's strength, his power, his understanding of where to drag Zubimendi in, his ability to attack the mouth of the goal. There are situations where he's actually orchestrated them. Pep Guardiola has orchestrated them, and obviously, massive mistake from Kepa, and it probably doesn't happen if he drops the ball, of course. But if we just actually look at the outlook of the goal, the clipped ball from the right-hand side, the way Zubimendi is dragged deep into his own area, that is orchestrated from the start by Pep Guardiola. Now, the second thing was Pep at half-time said to find the space on the right because Rice likes to jump onto Rodri or Bernardo. So we can see that Cherki was the free man, and that's where the goals come from. Now, I've got two examples to show you there. So in this example here, we can see in the first half, Arsenal are pressing Manchester City's 4-2 build-up. Now, if we looked at the Arsenal one, City were playing a lot more reserved and allowing the goalkeeper to have the ball. Arsenal don't do that. Arsenal run after the ball. And we can see in this screenshot here, if we just pause it where James Trafford is about to clip it into the midfield, if we zoom in on Declan Rice, he's stood next to Kai Havertz and he has followed Rodri all the way into into Manchester City's penalty area. Now, if we look behind Rice, we can see the amount of space Bernardo Silva is left in. So when James Trafford pings the ball, Cherki has ran infield, dragged Gabriel, so Gabriel now can't step out onto Bernardo Silva. Bernardo Silva gets the layoff from Cherki, and then Nunes runs it down to Semenyo, and then Semenyo has this beautiful kick and run, passing Cappier, and it was the first time in the game where we seen Man City under the cosh, when we seen Arsenal have a little bit of a wobble because Semenyo put that ball in and Haaland got in front of Saliba and he was about a millimetre short of heading it home. So that was the first sign of what was to come when Arsenal pressed up against Manchester City. In the second half, whilst Arteta kept doing the compactness on the side, there wasn't much high-pressing moments in any phase of play when Manchester City had the ball because them rotations, them dragging and picking apart the jumps from Rice with Bernardo and Rodri, they were causing big problems. So I'm now going to run you on into the final goal from Nico O'Reilly. So this is the second goal, and unironically, we can see that the goal comes from Arsenal in that 4-2 build-up. Same principles from the screenshots we said before. Manchester City high zonal block. Ball is played square to Saliba and the ball is punted long. Again, when the ball is punted long, we can see the two sitting midfielders of Manchester City around one player. So right now, if we just pause it and we split the game up into thirds, if we split the game up into small-sided games, like a coaching drill, we can see that Manchester City have got 6 players against Arsenal's 4 players when that ball is punted long. That is the good that gets you with the zonal block. That is the good that gets you because you have all the players in nice space to win the second balls. So when this header is won, we can see how Doku now has the ball on the left-hand side and he's in behind Ben White. And if we fast forward it on now, we can see something actually really interesting here. So Nico O'Reilly was talking in that thing about the space was on the right-hand side. We knew Cherki was the free man. Now, if we actually look at Nico O'Reilly's goal, so it's all come from that 4-2 build-up. It's all come from Guardiola restricting the space, playing a zonal block, winning the knockdowns, Arsenal having no solutions in the build-up. We can now see that when the ball is actually worked out onto the right-hand side, Semenyo has made a dart diagonally through the box to drag Hincapié over. So when they're in the box now waiting for the ball to come in, and we can see Cherki's got his hands in the air waiting for the ball, look at the penalty area. Haaland is right next to Semenyo. And if we look at the organisation of Arsenal's back four, Hincapié's playing right centre-half, Zubimendi's playing left centre-half, Gabriel's playing left-back, Saliba's playing right-back, and marking out wide on the right-hand side is Trossard. So now Manchester City have got a 2v1 against Trossard. Rodri plays a lovely deft pass. It's a clipped ball. And once again, Nico O'Reilly wins that header by popping up in that same space where he's running diagonally through and carrying his man through that. This time, it's Bukayo Saka. So, honestly, I thought this was one of the most impressive, especially the second half, one of the most impressive second halves I've seen from Guardiola throughout the entire season. The suffocation they had over Arsenal, the way they were knocking it about, the pace of the ball, some of Rodri's clips to pull the shape wide. He kept clipping the ball to Cherki, Semenyo, Doku. They swapped the wingers. They did everything well, Manchester City. They were winning the knockdowns. And yeah, it was really good to watch. And I think Pep Guardiola has found this season very hard in many ways because it's a massive reset for the club. But it does now look like he's got one of the trophies that he's probably one of the most proud of in his career in terms of what he's managed to do with the squad. And they have got some brilliant attacking players. I thought Semenyo was unbelievable. I think Nico O'Reilly throughout the entire season has been great. I think he's a really unique player. Someone who England will definitely take to the World Cup because he has such a unique, versatile profile. He can play with, you know, somewhat of a fluid left-hand side player, someone who can hold the width and he can crash that space in between. Different type of player to Lewis Hall. And yeah, I just thought Man City were absolutely exceptional. But more importantly, like just to finish off, I'm not going to have too big of a go at Arteta, but this felt almost bizarre how little he did to adapt throughout the game. And obviously Manchester City have still got to play Arsenal at home in the league, and I'm not going to sit here and say that, you know, this is going to be the momentum Man City need to chase them down. It might well be, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But what I noticed throughout the large majority of this game was that Arsenal had no answer. And I do understand a lot of people saying they did miss the number 10. Having Havertz and Gyökeres up front together was really bad in this game, even though they were getting favourable long balls. Some of the long balls from Kepa were so slow and so high up in the air. It had no zip on it. It was just dropping out the air. And I think they won collectively like 3 out of 21 duels, them centre-forward pairing, and it just didn't work. And they desperately missed a player like Ødegaard, Eze, to get the foot on the ball and play. And I think when you listen to Arteta's comments after the game, there was a lot of, we didn't do well enough keeping the ball, and they didn't. Some of the stats we've had there, they only had one game where they've had less 10 pass sequences. They really struggled in this game, and it was one for me where I was looking at and going, they did really struggle, but they struggled a lot, and there was no adaptation throughout the entire game, and it was really, really like strange to see. I'm not going to lie, and I thought overall, if I just take it back to this, what we mentioned before, this 4-2. If I just take it back to this now, which is what Manchester City were doing against Arsenal. From this situation, there are things you can do as a manager. There are, and he didn't do any of them. It was really worrying. In my opinion, if you're struggling in deep build-up like this, and you're knocking the ball long, make your conditions for them long balls better. Put Rice up there. Rice was still dancing around the 6-yard box trying to get the ball. Saka was still coming in here. Push one fullback on. It took a fullback in. You know, if he goes there, what's he going to do? Is he going to stay there? And I thought it was so worrying, the fact that none of that ever happened. The substitutions were incredibly late. And I thought, I'm not going to say he's wobbled Arsenal, because I think emotionally Arsenal are in a different place, but it's a really worrying sign, that, for me. And I largely do put it down to the number 10, the goalkeeper, don't get me wrong. David Raya in these positions, when he's got no pressure on the ball, will be able to find balls through the lines a lot easier than Kepa. But Arsenal never really got out in these moments. They really struggled to build through, and it was something I've not seen Arsenal struggle with yet. And that was a zonal high block, and it was very, very strange. And I thought, just in general, it was one of Arteta's worst showings from his perspective. It just didn't really look to do anything. And they had players on the bench. I'm not making excuses. They had players on the bench. He could have done something bold. He could have played Saka as that number 10 and put Madueke on the right. He could have done a lot more things, because going into the game, it was quite evident Arsenal were going to need that central presence, someone to stand in the hole, maybe in front of it, ask the question of the second centre-half. But he decided to resort to 2 big men up front and lump it long, and it never worked. I mean, that was the plan from minute 0 to 70. And Arsenal started the game well. They had a lot of channel balls into Gyökeres. Havertz missed a big chance, but after that, you know, there was nothing, and they were losing track of the game. At half-time, the pattern of the game was in place. Everyone could see what was going on. City were mounting pressure on there, and even though they weren't having shots, they were getting territory, and you could see them edging into the game. You could see Cherki Semenyo getting confidence. And it was a really bad one from Arteta, and I'm just a bit interested now to see what other teams and how other teams react to Arsenal by doing this. I don't know. Could it really be something that teams try and use? Let's see, because it worked a treat for Man City and Pep Guardiola, and I thought it was one of the best tactical displays I've seen from Pep Guardiola in quite a few months, if not maybe a year. And it was something we have seen before. I think Maresca's done this against Liverpool. I think Liverpool have done it under Arne Slot. I remember Ten Hag doing this against Arsenal at home. Yeah, this 4-2-4, high block, don't give them anything in between. Leave your two sitting midfielders to recoup the second balls. Worked a treat, and it's one of the best tactical performances we've seen this season from Pep Guardiola. So if you did enjoy, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to the Overlap Breakdown if you want to see more analysis every week. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.